I think, we kind of acknowledge that this is the first Sunday of the year. And I think that with it being the first Sunday of the year, it would be so nice if we could just sit back and make some predictions and kind of just say what's going to happen this year. And so I think that, when everybody starts the beginning of the year, they want to know, hey, what's going to happen? What's going to be ahead for the year? And so when I thought about that, the word that came to my mind was challenging. I think that 2024 is going to be a very challenging year. There's so many different reasons that we could point in that direction, but I think that, when the year starts, everybody has such positive feelings and positive emotions, and this is going to be my year. And when we think about how, this is going to be an awesome year, and it's going to be my year, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this, and some of the things that we don't think about are things like, no matter what, this year we're going to have some hurt in our life. We're going to have some pain in our life, and we're going to have some misunderstandings with people that we love. And the bad part is, I think we have to acknowledge that, some of the people that we love very much that are here right now aren't going to be here when the year ends. And that's something that we don't really spend a lot of time thinking about. We just sit there and we think that the world's going to be perfect and everything's going to be wonderful. And, we just sometimes forget that, God said that there was going to be trouble and that everything wasn't going to be perfect. And I just think when I think about some of the possibilities of some of the things that might happen this year, the word challenging is what comes to mind. And I think that as I was thinking of that and I was kind of reading over what I wanted to go over today, the thing that kind of kept coming to me was a quote that I had heard a long time ago. And it was, complacency is the enemy of progress. And so for some reason, that's what I just kept thinking of. I kept thinking about what a challenging year it's going to be. But then for some reason, that quote just kept popping into my mind. And as I thought about it, I was just thinking to myself, sometimes we're just complacent. And we're going to go to the next slide here real quick. And when the word complacent, I don't know what the definition was that I had in my mind, but the definition was showing smug or uncritical satisfaction with oneself or one's achievements. And then it said here, you can't afford to be complacent about security. So that was their sentence to kind of make sure that we understood complacency. And I guess for some reason, even though you always talk about complacency and you always talk about it as an individual, I didn't realize just how kind of selfish that word is. And it was kind of sitting there saying, when you think of smug, you think of like somebody with their nose in the air thinking that they're better than you. And, you just don't really realize that uncritical satisfaction with oneself or one's achievement. And for some reason, when I read that, I kind of thought to myself, we might run into some smug people in 2024. We might run into some people who, they think that their opinion is right, or, that, we can't disagree with them, and if we disagree with them, they're gonna cancel us. That's a popular word from 2023 and before that. And so, with all these things that are going to happen, how do we behave? How do we behave as Christians? How do we go into this world where we know that it's going to be challenging and we have all these things going on around us? What do we do? And one of the things that I've been thinking about was, it just seems like in December we spend so much time thinking about the birth of Jesus. And then usually somewhere around the beginning of April we think about the death of Jesus. But what do we spend time in the middle thinking about? And a lot of times we kind of have, a little sermon plan or something like that. And we don't really spend any time talking about Jesus or the life of Jesus. And so I wanted to take some time to really just sit back. And I think that if we're going to have a challenging year, the only way that we can get through it is to look at the life of Jesus and see how he handled things and what he said. And then that would help us get through this. So if we go to the next slide here, the focus verse that I have, and it's going to show up towards the end here. It's a verse that says, and this is Matthew 5, verse 47. And it says, if you are kind only to your friends, how are you different from anyone else? Even pagans do that. And I just think to myself, it seems like it's been, probably what, 7, 8 years where it seems like there's always been this, this disagreement, or this, it's been popular to just hate other people and disagree with other people. And so as we kind of read this, the people who over the last few years, it seems like if they agree with us and we like them, man, we show a lot of love. This world, I think there is still a whole lot of love, and if we love somebody, man, we are so loving. But what about those people who are different and disagree with us? The world has been very popular and has kind of told us that if somebody disagrees with us, it's okay just to ignore them, or if something bad's, we should celebrate that. And so that's why I wanted this one to be our focus verse for the day. It says, if you are only kind to your friends, how different are you from anyone else? And I think that's so important to just kind of sit there and think about. And as we go through the verses today, just to be thinking about, is there times that we're complacent, or is there a time that we should be showing love and we're not showing love? And that kind of leads us to what they call the Sermon on the Mount. And in Matthew chapter 5, the first 4 chapters are a whole lot of, everything kind of the beginning of Jesus' life. And then all of a sudden, chapter 5 hits, and it's the Sermon on the Mount. And this is kind of his coming out party, the party of, hey, I'm going to start preaching to you guys, and I'm going to start telling you guys and giving you guys direction. And so it's so important, and this takes Matthew chapter 5, 6, and 7, is the Sermon on the Mount. And so it says here, one day as he saw crowds gathering, Jesus went up on the mountainside and sat down. His disciples gathered around him, and he began to teach them. So here he has a situation where, everybody's kind of gathering and they're asking a whole lot of questions, and they're craving knowledge. They're craving, hey, why are you here? What are you here to teach us? And so once they all start gathering around, he decides, okay, I'm going to start teaching you guys. And what he's going to do is he's going to take everything that they've ever learned and been taught, and he's going to be like, okay, let's look at this. Let's evaluate this and see if we're looking at it in the right way. And so it starts off with a thing called the Beatitudes. And it says, God blesses those who are poor and realize their need for him, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. So right away he kind of starts off, and the poor people in that time, we ignore them. That's their problem. And he says, just remember that there are people out there who are poor, and because they're in that bad situation, they realize how much they need a God, how much they need a Savior, how much they need a Messiah to come and save them. And so he starts off by saying, blessed are those, God blesses those who are poor, because they realize how much they need him, and so they're the ones that are going to have the kingdom of heaven. And so then he continues, and he said, God blesses those who mourn, for they will be comforted. And we talked about that already, that, in the year 2024, it'd be wonderful if, we don't suffer any losses. But our past says that at some point we're going to suffer a loss in 2024. And so what he is saying here is, you are going to suffer a loss, and you're going to be in a mourning situation, and God is going to bless you and comfort you. And then he says here, God blesses those who are humble, for they will inherit the whole earth. So again, when we talk about that word complacency, it was very much it said uncritical, and we don't want to criticize ourselves, and we have such a high view of everything that we've accomplished. And he says here, hey, we need to be a little bit humble. Those are the people that are going to inherit the whole earth, those people that are humble. And now verse 6, it says, God blesses those who hunger and thirst for justice, for they will be satisfied. And again, if we think about this time that we're at in 2024, I think that there's been times that we've kind of been watching the news and we say, where's the justice at? How did we get in this situation? And I think that's one of the tough things that, it just seems like more than ever I've said to myself, man, how did I get in this situation? What did I do? Where did I get lost? What happened? And so it says here that, instead of wishing that, when bad things happen, or when bad things happen to people we don't like, instead of saying, ha ha ha, they got theirs, we should be hungering and thirsting that justice happens. And again, that's something that we don't always realize. And so it continues here, and it says, God blesses those who are merciful, for they will be shown mercy. And again, if we sit there and we think about it, how often do we see something and we just, hope something horrible happens to somebody? Or we see that something horrible happens to somebody and we're like, well, they got what they deserved. And it says here that, those who are merciful will be shown mercy. And that is something that we forget. That is something that, like I said, when that person, something negative happens, we almost celebrate it. We have become a nation of people who, when something happens to somebody that we don't like, we celebrate it. And it says here that, it's one of those things where the mercy that we show to others will be the mercy that will be shown to us. And I think that's something that we need to remember. And then now here in verse 8 it says, God blesses those whose hearts are pure, for they will see God. And again, when we talk about those people whose hearts are pure, I think sometimes we hear that and we think, oh, it needs to be perfect. And so if I say to you that if you are perfect, then you will see God, most of us say, oh, I'm out. It's the first Sunday of the year, and guess what? I've already messed that up. And I can tell you very honestly that it's the first Sunday of the month, and I messed it up probably 6 days ago. Maybe 7. Is that you voting for 7 days ago?
Yep.
Okay. Shelley says 7 days ago I already messed up being perfect. So what that really actually means is that when it says your hearts are pure, it means that when you mess up, you go to God and you say, forgive me, I have sinned. That's it. Sometimes we make it and we try and make it to be really fancy, and again we try and make it a production. But in order to be pure, all we need to do is say, hey, I messed up, please forgive me. And now in verse 9 it says, God blesses those who work for peace, for they will be called the children of God. And when I read that, I thought to myself, we are all going to need to be peacemakers in 2024. There's going to be a whole lot of situations where people are going to be arguing, or people are going to be unhappy, or, sometimes it could happen in our own household or our own family where there's arguments or strife, and what we need to do is be a peacemaker. And now in verse 10 it says, God blesses those who are persecuted for doing right, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. And so again, this is one of those things where, every time we talk about it, every time we think about it, it's hard doing the right thing. It's hard that when everybody else is going left, for us to take a right, or however you want to say it. When everybody is doing something else and we choose to do the other thing, some people make it sound like it's so easy. When everybody at work is gossiping, it's easy to gossip. When everybody else is talking about something that we shouldn't talk about, it's easy to join in. And so we have to understand, we do that because guess what? We don't want to not fit in. Or we don't want to be made fun of, or, we don't want to be persecuted for those things. And so this is a verse that says that we're going to be blessed if we're ever persecuted for doing the right thing in those situations where it's hard. And so now they take it even further here, because it says, God blesses you when people mock you and persecute you and lie about you and say all sorts of evil things against you because you are my followers. And I think that we all have been in these situations. We've all been in these situations where, we choose not to do something and people are kind of like, oh, that guy, he doesn't do that. Or, oh, he thinks he's better than us, or whatever the case may be. When you don't participate, guess what? Sometimes you're going to get made fun of. Sometimes you're going to be left out. And so the response to all these things, when it says, hey, these things are going to happen, the response here is be happy about it. Be very glad, for a great reward awaits you in heaven. And remember, the ancient prophets were persecuted in the same way. And so it's just a friendly reminder here that says, guess what? It's going to happen, and when it happens, you need to be happy about it. When people say, hey, you don't fit in, when people say, hey, you're a little bit different, be happy about it, because guess what? You are going to be rewarded, but it just might not be today. And so all these people who are doing these things, they feel like their reward is right now, and that's what they're choosing. They want that reward right now. But God here is saying, hey, let's be patient. Jesus is saying, let's be patient, because guess what? The reward you're going to get is a lot bigger. And then he also kind of says, hey, all these people that you've been hearing about for years, whether it be Moses or somebody like that, they were all persecuted for doing the right thing also. And so now there's a teaching about salt and light. And again, one of the things that Jesus did that was so effective was he used situations and things that they could understand to make sure that they were getting what he was saying. And so what he says here is, he said, you are the salt of the earth. But what good is salt if it has lost its flavor? Can you make it salty again? It will be thrown out and trampled underfoot as worthless. So he's kind of sitting there saying, we need to be the flavor. We need to be the thing that adds to this. And that if we don't have that, it's pretty much worthless. And so he's telling us that. And then to make sure that everybody understood, he said, you are the light of the world, like a city on a hilltop that cannot be hidden. No one lights a lamp and then puts it under a basket. Instead, a lamp is placed on a stand where it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your good deeds shine out for all to see, so that everyone will praise your heavenly Father. And so again, for some reason, it seems like over the last month and a half, these verses here, when it starts like in 14 to 16, I keep thinking about that. I just keep thinking to myself, it just seems like we run into so many people who are looking for a light. So many people just think that the world is full of darkness right now. And we have to be able to find that key thing where we say, guess what? I know that there's going to be some negatives, and I want to be set up to know that those things are going to happen. I don't want to live in the clouds and think that the world is perfect and nothing bad ever happens. But I also want to acknowledge that, guess what? I'm going to be the light. I am going to be the one who, when those people are gossiping, I'm going to find a way to stop them, and I'm going to be able to point out some positives about some people. I'm going to be able to, when everybody's having that bad day at work or that bad day where, maybe, again, we've talked about health. And when people are having some bad health, we're going to be the comfort. And to be able to be that comfort is the light that they need. And so we need to understand that what Jesus is saying is that as followers, there's a whole lot of people who aren't going to show up to church. There are going to be people who, and we've all ran into them, they think that, they just refuse to come in. They think that they've lived a life that, if they show up on Sunday morning, well, the thunder's going to hit and the snow's going to come or whatever the case may be, and we're all going to die because they showed up to church. And so what this is saying is we need to be the light to those people. We need to find a way to make everything positive and to be able to show them that, what? I understand that you've done some bad things. I've done some bad things. There's been a lot of negative. But guess what? I'm going to choose to ask for forgiveness and be the light. And so if we continue here into verse 17, it says, teaching about the law. And this is, again, something that they had big issues with when Jesus came. Because they were raised up on Moses and Moses' law. And when Jesus started talking, they thought that he was saying Moses' law isn't important. And so he says to these people, he says, don't misunderstand why I have come. I did not come to abolish the law of Moses or the writings of the prophets. No, I came to accomplish their purpose. I tell you the truth, until heaven and earth disappear, not even the smallest detail of God's law will disappear until its purpose is achieved. So if you ignore the least commandment and teach others to do the same, you will be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. But anyone who obeys God's laws and teaches them to be called great in the kingdom of heaven. But anyone who obeys God's law and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. But I warn you, unless your righteousness is better than the righteousness of the teachers of religious law and the Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. And so again, what he is trying to tell everybody there is, I'm not trying to say anything that Moses said was wrong. I'm not trying to tell you guys that everything that you've been doing your whole entire life is wrong. What I'm coming to tell you is that Moses talked about a greater purpose, and I'm that greater purpose. And so, instead of thinking all these negative things, understand that I'm going to tell you the truth. And if you listen and if we follow these rules, we're all going to have heaven. But if you try and teach something else, or if you think that you're better than everyone else and that you don't have any flaws, you're not going to be in the kingdom of heaven. And that was so hard for them to hear because, again, I think that they were people that were complacent. They were people who thought like, hey, we've been following this law of Moses for so long, so we're safe. And so now I think that he's really getting into some touchy subjects here. He's really getting into some things now that, when we start our day, our week tomorrow, and on Monday morning when, we're not necessarily around church people 100%, here's some things that we're going to run into. And so he says, teaching about anger. And I've always said that I believe, especially with men, but I'll definitely just call myself out here, man, sometimes I'm angry. Sometimes I'm just angry. I don't know why, but I'm angry. And so when he talks here, I feel as if it's something that I need to listen to. And he says, so you have heard your ancestors were told you must not murder. If you commit murder, you are the subject to judgment. And I think to myself, how many times have you gone to church and the preacher stood up and talked about, hey, I just want to remind everybody, do not murder. And he spent 25, 30 minutes saying, hey, when you go into your work week this week or you go in your daily life, don't murder. I don't know that I've ever heard anybody really talk about it other than they mention the sentence. I don't believe that for the majority of us, when we leave here on Sunday morning, that we're focused on not murdering anybody. And so I think that they kind of quickly dismiss it whenever somebody talked about murder. And so Jesus here says, okay, let's just calm down and we're not going to talk about murder. But I'm going to take it and tell you the truth. And I'm going to say, and this is verse 22 here, it says, but I say if you are even angry with someone, you are subject to judgment. And now this is the hard part. I know that this might not happen to anybody else, but every time I'm driving to work or home from work, this happens to me. Right here it says, if you call someone an idiot, you are in danger of being brought before the court. And I think to myself, how many times have I been driving and somebody around me is an idiot? How many times have I, seen somebody do something and man, I'm quick to call somebody an idiot. And here he is saying, hey, you know what, Joe, maybe you haven't murdered anybody, but you sure call people an idiot a lot. And so he says, you are in danger of being brought before the court, and if you curse someone, you are in danger of the fires of hell. So that means that, when the day of judgment comes, I can't just say, but God, I didn't murder anybody. He's not going to give me that free pass. And so it says, in verse 23 here, it says, so if you are presenting a sacrifice at the altar of the temple, and you suddenly remember that someone has something against you, leave your sacrifice there at the altar, go and be reconciled to that person, then come and offer your sacrifice to God. And so again, when he's talking about the law of Moses and that these people have all been dealing with, this right here is something that, because Jesus is the one talking to them, obviously he hasn't died on the cross yet. And so what he's saying is that based on what you know about the law of Moses, when you commit a sin or you do something wrong, you have to go make a sacrifice. And so he's saying that, while we were taught to go make a sacrifice, understand that part of that sacrifice is that if there's somebody out there that you're not in good standings with, go talk to them. And I think that that's so hard. And, again, we think, oh, that's the law of Moses. So, that's Old Testament, so we're safe. And so if we go to the next slide here, and we look at 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 28, it's a group of scriptures that are talking about communion. And so as they're talking about communion, they slip this verse in here, and it says, that is why you should examine yourself before eating the bread and drinking the cup. So before we just had communion like 10 minutes ago or so, did we all examine ourselves and make sure that there was nobody that we were upset with? But it's saying here that before we do that, we need to make sure that, we're okay with everyone. And I think to myself, oof, how many times have I taken communion and I did something that probably irritated my wife? It happens, let's be honest. How many times is there something where, whether it be a family member or a friend, and when we left work or we left, whatever, Saturday or whatever, if we hung out with them, before we left them, maybe we had a disagreement. Did we make it right, or are we just like, man, we'll be okay? And it says here that before we take communion, what we need to do is examine ourselves and see if there's anything wrong. And if there is something wrong, we need to make it right before we take communion. I hope that means that next week when we go to take communion, we all don't say pass. But sometimes it's kind of in that situation. And so now here in verse 25, to get back to Matthew chapter 5, it says, when you are on the way to court with your adversary, settle your differences quickly. Otherwise, your accuser may hand you over to the judge, who will hand you over to the officer, and you will be thrown into prison. And if that happens, you surely won't be free again until you have paid the last penny. And so when I read that, I think that we need to kind of make it a little bit more of a 2024 version here. But it says, you know, I think one of the things that I always, when I read stuff like this, that I kind of look at, is it says, when you're on the way to court with your adversary. And so what that means is that even as Christians, we're going to sometimes have an adversary. But if we don't find a way to be a peacemaker with our adversary, if we have to go to court or we have to go in front of people and say, hey, this is what happened, what we do is we risk the chance of that judge maybe not seeing things our way, or maybe as a group of people not seeing it our way. And in the end, we're the ones that have to kind of take the hit. We're the ones that, you know, the world is going to sit there and say, hey, you know, that Joe who goes to that church over there in Riverton, he's wrong. And he let it go so far that now a judge has to decide and say that he's wrong. And so our witness is no longer being the light. Our witness is, Joe is the one who got in trouble. If I'm being honest about that one of the things that I look at, I still have not paid that speeding ticket. It's not due till the 9th and it's only the 7th. We're okay. But if I don't pay that speeding ticket, guess what happens? Maybe I get pulled over again, and you know what? Then he says, hey, you haven't paid this ticket. I'm the one that's wrong. I'm the one who was speeding. I'm the one that's 100% wrong. I'm the one who was the bad witness. Teaching about adultery. And it says here, you have heard the commandment that says you must not commit adultery. But I say anyone who even looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart. I don't want to be the one that points out that he says looks at a woman, and he doesn't say looks at a man. That seems a little shady to me, but I'm just saying. But anyway, it says, you have heard it say that you must not commit adultery. But here it says, even if you look at someone with lust, you've already committed adultery. So if your eye, even your good eye, causes you to lust, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your hand, even your stronger hand, causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And I think that these are so important to sit here and kind of look at, that sometimes we know exactly why we're sinning. We exactly know what's causing the issue. And again, we try and find a way to justify it. It's not my fault that every time I turn on the TV, there's something out there that causes me to sin. Everywhere. You know, we can't even watch the Family Channel or Disney or anything. It seems like everywhere there's something. That's not my fault. And so here Jesus is, and he's saying, hey, figure it out. It's better for you not to, you know, turn on the TV ever than to be in hell. And so it's just something to think about, that as we go throughout our week this week, maybe sit there and focus on some of the things that are causing us issues. Do we need to reduce something? Do we need to reduce, you know, Facebook time or social media or TV or something, and really look if that's the thing that's causing issues in our life? Is that the things that's kind of causing us to maybe not pay attention to people and be the light that we're supposed to be? Teaching about divorce. And this is an interesting one. And again, you know, they're bringing up the law of Moses here. And it says, you have heard the law that says, a man can divorce his wife by merely giving her a written notice of divorce. But I say that a man who divorces his wife, unless she has been unfaithful, causes her to commit adultery, and anyone who marries a divorced woman also commits adultery. And this one is interesting because when I heard this explained by someone, what they said was, it was pretty much the equivalent of, you know, the law of Moses stated that all you had to do was kind of just tell that person, hey, I'm divorcing you. And so if they burnt your dinner last night, give them a certificate, they're done. And by the law of Moses, that was okay. No matter what happened, no matter what they did, if they upset you in any way, as long as you gave them that certificate, everything was okay. And so again, Jesus says, hey, I think we need to reevaluate this. If we're supposed to be the light, if we're supposed to be the people that are different, if we're supposed to be the difference makers and the peacemakers, then guess what? Just because she burnt the food or whatever, that doesn't mean it's okay to give her the certificate. It means that, guess what? Unless she or he, I don't want to be weird here, unless he or she does something that is being unfaithful to you, guess what? Make it work. Now, I know that, there's extreme situations, and a verse like this can't go over everything. So I don't want anybody to think that, there's not other issues or other reasons. But just understand that what he is saying here is, you guys have been divorcing people for some very silly reasons. Knock it off. And so now, teaching about vows, and it says, you have also heard that our ancestors were told, you must not break your vows. You must carry out the vows you make to the Lord. But I say, do not make any vows. Do not say by heaven, because heaven is God's throne. And do not say by the earth, because the earth is his footstool. And do not say by Jerusalem, for Jerusalem is the city of the great king. Do not even say by my head, for you can't turn one hair white or black. Just a simple yes, I will, or no, I won't. Anything beyond this is from the evil one. And when I read that, I think to myself, we've all known somebody who's pretty dramatic. We've all known somebody who, when they're trying to say that they're okay, they kind of, oh, I swear to God, I didn't do it. And that means that they did it usually. And so what he is saying here is, let's not do that. Either you're going to do it or you're not going to do it. Just say it and we're good. And now here, teaching about revenge. You have heard the law say that punishment must match the injury, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But I say, do not resist an evil person. If someone slaps you on the right cheek, offer the other cheek also. If you are sued in court and your shirt is taken from you, give your coat too. If a soldier demands that you carry his gear for a mile, carry it 2 miles. Give to those who ask, and don't turn away from those who want to borrow. And so again, it's one of these situations where, the way that these people were, if something seemed unfair or something didn't seem right, it was okay to not treat them fairly. And he's saying, nope, sometimes things are going to be unfair. Let's be the light. Let's do the right thing. And now here is our last slide here. It says, teaching about the love for enemies. And again, this is the kind of the thing that heading into the rest of this year, I think we're going to need to spend some time thinking about. It says, you have heard that the law says, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. In that way, you will be acting as a true child of your Father in heaven. For he gives his sunlight to both the evil and the good, and he sends rain on the just and the unjust alike. If you love only those who love you, what reward is there for that? Even corrupt tax collectors do that much. If you are kind to only your friends, how are you different from anyone else? Even the pagans do that. But you are to be perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. And so again, as he says that, and we hear the word perfect, we think to ourselves, nobody is perfect. And what he's saying here is guess what? You gotta do more than you think. It's gonna be hard. There's gonna be times that you mess up, but guess what? We're the example to everyone else. And again, as we head into the rest of this year, I think that it's gonna be a challenging year. And I just want all of us to be able to look back at some of these verses and see how hard it's going to be and how we need to really act. We're going to sing In My Heart There Rings a Melody. Number 26 are up here. But let's have our closing prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for just giving us direction in these difficult times and just knowing how we need to act and what we need to think about and what we need to look at and how we need to lead our lives. And I've said it so many times, but we need to find a way to be the light. I really do believe that this world is struggling in darkness. And the only way that we're going to get past it and grow together and grow to love you is to be the light that people are looking for. And I do believe that people are looking for a light. Please help us to be patient and listen to your word and follow your direction. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.